Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Booting Up. Today we are talking with Clement Kao, who is a product manager at Blend, and he's also the co-founder of productmanagerhq.com, where they are teaching people how to become product managers and basically everything that you need to know about that. So we'll get into that in just a second, and I'll bring him on in just 1 minute. But before we get into that, friendly reminder to everyone to subscribe to the channel. This is going to be the first episode of an exciting season. You're going to be learning a lot from a lot of different guests and different perspectives. So you don't want to miss it. And for anybody that might be listening on the podcast, subscribe on your favorite platform. But otherwise, we'll be doing one episode a week, always live. So you can hop in the stream, ask any questions, and overall just learn about how to break into tech. So before we bring them on, also one more thing to shout out is if you're looking for our bootcamp grad community, you can join at apprentice.co/community and join us there. But let's get on with the show. So let's bring on Clement.
Hey. Good afternoon.
How's everything going today?
Things are going great. Nice and sunny here in Santa Clara, California. I'm really excited and humbled to be on the show.
No, thank you for hopping on. So where we want to start today is, helping people first understand product management. It's kind of a field that not many people understand, even the ones that are in it. And I know you are kind of an expert. So first, can we start with what's your definition of product management?
Yeah, for sure. So I think one of the things that can really help people understand what product management is actually to think about a world where there aren't any product managers first, right? So, if we take a step back, right, like a world that didn't have any product managers, let's say maybe 20 years, 30 years ago, right, kind of you have these three core groups of people who exist in the world, right? So you've got people who are customers. And so customers are basically people who have pains, right? Like there are things that they wish they could get solved, but they don't really know how to solve them themselves, right? Mm-hmm. And so customers are looking for solutions and they're eager to pay for that. Then you have businesses, right? So a business is defined as, an organization who is trying to, create profits and be able to stick around for a long time to create that value and keep people employed, right? And they want to be able to find customers and be able to sell things to them. And you've got what I call a development team. And so a development team is basically, engineers, designers, people who are actually creating things. And what they're really excited about is how do we make stuff that we're excited about, but also in a way where it doesn't break all the time, right? So things that, we think are really cool, but doesn't cause us to have to stay up all night trying to maintain it. And so in this world without product managers, these three groups fight all the time, which is really frustrating for everyone, right? Because basically, right, like customers and businesses are always fighting against each other because customers want businesses to deliver things that businesses don't necessarily know how to deliver yet, right? They want businesses to deliver on all of these promises and fulfill all these needs that the business might not be set up to do yet. And on the flip side, businesses are always trying to sell things to customers that customers don't really need, right? Because just because a business knows how to make a thing doesn't mean that all of customers want to have that thing, right? So businesses and customers are always fighting over, are you creating the thing that I want, right? And then similarly, customers and developers also fight all the time because customers will try to force developers to build things a specific way, right? Like I need this screen, like this specific way. I need a blue button here that like does this thing. And that just doesn't make sense to build that way. But on the flip side, many times, engineers and designers, they might get so excited about new technology that they'll try to ship it without really checking in on, is this actually going to solve someone's pain, right? So, there was at some point in time, like a rise in chatbots, right? There was a lot of thoughts about like, how can we make things, all on the blockchain without really thinking about, well, how does that actually make a customer's life better, right? So customers and development teams also always fighting, right? And then development teams and businesses are also always fighting because businesses, they're always saying, well, you need to give us more features, because that's how we're going to be able to make money to stay in business, right? Makes sense. But on the flip side, engineers and designers are always saying, no, like what we've built isn't scalable, doesn't look great. We need to refactor, we need to rethink the whole system, right? Like we want to invest in scalability and robustness. And so, in terms of velocity, businesses and development teams are also always stuck, right? Yeah. And so the one thing that actually solves the pains of customers, businesses, and development teams is the product in the middle, right? So a product is defined as something that solves customer pains in a way that keeps a business in business, right? Drives profits, drives revenues, and is something that developers are eager to build and maintain over time, right? And so then when we think about it that way, then it's actually pretty easy to think about what a product manager does, right? Because a product manager, they fill the white space between customers, businesses, and development teams to try to figure out what are the pains of each of these three groups and how do we build something that, customers are going to find valuable, that businesses are going to be able to earn profits off of, and that our development teams, again, engineers and designers, are going to be really excited about building and maintaining. So that's really the core of what a product manager does. It's coordinate across these three groups and work through a lot of, let's say, negotiations and coordination to really create something that's valuable to all three of them.
So in summary, it sounds like your personality manager, basically.
Basically, yeah, you're herding cats, honestly. And the thing is, kind of each of these three groups out in the world, right? Like they have such different needs, right? And so that creates a lot of constraints on what makes a good product. But those constraints are actually really great because they force you to get creative. They force you to really start thinking about how can I try to solve for all of these three groups at once, rather than trying to over-index on just a single one of those groups. So yeah, it's very much herding cats, really understanding the people that make up this group of people, right? Like what drives them? What are their mindsets? What do they care about? And really getting to understand them so that you can deliver that value to them without sacrificing value to the other two groups. So it's very much a juggling game. It's very much a relationship management game. But it's really exciting to be able to create things that are valuable for all three parties. Yeah.
Yeah, I think designers, developers, everyone involved in a product has to have that same mindset, because lots of times, I'm sure many bootcamp grads knows, you build this project and you think, hey, like people will just use it, but that's not the case. You have to do the research. So on your side, like in terms of what you're usually doing, do you do a lot of research into each person, like in surveys, or you focus on one?
Yeah, great question. So I think so the way that I really try to get to understand my customers is try to get feedback from a lot of different ways, right? So I think the thing that is, of course, most valuable is when you put a product in front of them and they react to it, right? And it doesn't have to be a full-blown product. It can be even just something as, let's say, low fidelity as a paper prototype, like just like some paper mocks, right? And kind of work through, okay, what is it that you think you see on this screen, right? Like, why is that particularly valuable to you? Is this actually solving a pain for you, right? Just being able to get that time to really talk to customers and understand what is it that they're doing is really important to try to understand how are they making decisions. And so I'd say, in terms of making sure that what problems you're trying to solve, I would say that qualitative one-on-one interviews with customers is incredibly, incredibly important, right? I think, of course, surveys are valuable, but they're really only valuable when you're really at scale, right? So let's say you have hundreds of customers, thousands of customers. There's no way for you to interview every single one of them. Then being able to do a survey helps you kind of quickly eliminate a couple of paths of, okay, well, there's this broad category that doesn't make sense. There's this broad category that seems to make sense. And then from there, you can dive into those deeper one-on-ones with customers. And kind of the way that I think about it, of course, is with customers, right? You can have almost infinite customers if you're building a software product that really scales. And so you really do need to balance in between having these one-on-one interviews versus surveys. But when you're working with your own teammates, when you work with your business stakeholders in sales and marketing, when you're working with your engineers and your designers, it's all about those one-on-one touch points. It's all about really trying to understand the person and understanding what is it that they need from me, right? What are the things that keeps them up at night? What are the things that they really care about? And how can I really make sure that I'm representing their point of view as we try to work through how do we create something that makes our customers happy, keeps the business in business, and is something that's not a nightmare to build, right? And so it's really making sure that we can advocate for all three parties, even if one of them or two of them aren't in the room together. I think a lot of it is, again, going back to that previous point you made, right? In summary, a lot of it is relationship management, and you can't really manage that relationship unless you first understand the person who is that person's wants and needs and desires, so that you can advocate for them and find something that will work for them.
So going to the personality management. So what made you want to initially get into product management? Were you like, hey, like I want to be managing all these people within the product itself, or what was that initial motivation?
Yeah, that is actually a really good question. So I actually didn't know that I wanted to become a product manager. In fact, when I first heard about product management back in college, I thought there's no way I'm going to do this job, right? Because basically what people were telling me is, well, Clement, being a product manager means you get to write a bunch of tickets and you get to make sure that people do the tickets, and then you get to tell people, oh, the tickets are done. And I thought that's paper pushing. Like that's not valuable and that's not very fun. And so I actually didn't know that I wanted to be a product manager for a very long time. I think I accidentally fell into product management through a series of accidents, I guess.
Good accidents.
Yeah, they're really fantastic accidents. I think basically when I first graduated from college, I had this double major in business and biology. And the thing is, those two majors don't go particularly well together. Like in like the business space, there's not a lot of careers that kind of just open up right out the gate. And so I didn't really know what I wanted to do with myself. So I said, okay, you know what? I'm going to be a management consultant, because as a management consultant, I get to be dropped into all of these, really high performing companies, right? And I get to see a lot of the problems that they're going to be struggling with. How can I help them, right? And so that's why I first started my career as a management consultant. And in terms of the way that we were doing our consulting, we basically had this proprietary analytics platform that we had ourselves that we would train our clients on so that they would be able to also answer some of their questions of how is our business performing. Yeah. But the thing is that platform was built by PhD statisticians, and the end users were marketing analysts who didn't know statistics. And so the challenge was that the software was really hard to use. And so I was on the phone every day for 3 hours, 4 hours a day, just talking to people of, no, that's not how you set up the analysis. No, that's not what this error means. That's not statistical significance, right? Like just working through all of these things. And I thought, this is incredibly wasteful, right? Like it's me and 100 other consultants all on the phone 3 to 4 hours a day, every day, talking to people about, no, this is not how you use the software. And so I actually started leaning into design and user research. So from there, basically, I started interviewing my customers kind of rather than being, oh, like, let me be your tech support guy, right? Well, what is it that you expected when you hit that screen, right? Like, why doesn't this error make sense, right? What types of errors would make sense? What were the objectives that you had, right? Like, where did we let you down? What was the gap, right? And so taking in all of that feedback and consolidating it for my product team at that consulting firm, right? And from there, basically, we started to work through prototyping. So how can we create a new generation of products that are going to be much more intuitive and usable for our customers? And from there, kind of, I became this kind of mini user researcher kind of person, while also still maintaining my full-time job as a management consultant, right? So kind of definitely a little bit too much of a good thing. So I was working, 70-hour, 80-hour work weeks, and that just wasn't cutting it. And so from there, basically, there was another company that reached out that happened to know that I was good at, both the management consultant like strategy side as well as this user research side. And they said, well, Clement, what we want is we want you to join us because we are trying to figure out how can we launch a totally new business, and we don't know how to launch that business unless we understand our users. And it looks like you know exactly how to talk to users and create these new products that don't exist before, right? Because that's what you've been doing at your current company of trying to figure out this next generation of more usable products. And so I said, okay, but what's in it for me? And they said, oh, well, we're only going to make you work 50 hours a week, right? And we're going to give you 20% extra pay. And I said, okay, I'm in, right? Like, tell me no more. I'm getting paid 20% more to do 20% less work, right? Like, I'm in. So I hopped over to that, basically a real estate brokerage company. And one of the things that we were trying to figure out is basically we were really good at marketing to people who want to buy homes, right? Because the thing is, when someone wants to buy a home, it's pretty clear when they want to buy one, right? Like they're going to schedule themselves for open houses. And so you know when to put a real estate agent in front of them, right? And as a real estate brokerage, our bread and butter is getting real estate agents to go, help people buy and sell homes. But the problem is we didn't know how to get a real estate agent in front of a person when that person wanted to sell a home, right? Because the thing is, when you decide to sell a home, you could take many, many months, many, many years to decide whether I want to sell a home or not. And if you put a real estate agent in front of them way too early, then you're wasting their time, you're taking up their attention, and they think, well, this is irrelevant. And if you surface it to them too late, they already have an agent, and then you've lost, right? So kind of how do you find that sweet spot of when to surface that real estate agent to them? And so basically from there, I did a lot of that user research, again, of really trying to understand, for people who are trying to sell their homes, how do they make these decisions and when they want to sell their homes? Why do they make that decision, right? And also working from the real estate agent side, across all of the customers that they've worked with, right? What triggers them to be successful? What triggers them to be not successful? Kind of when is the best time to engage? And from there, basically, we were able to find, we have this really compelling business opportunity to launch this startup within a startup, basically to serve all of these people who are selling their homes rather than our traditional bread and butter of people who are trying to buy homes. So from there, we decided, okay, we're going to launch this business, right? I kind of moved away from user research into strategy/management consulting of trying to convince my CEO, CFO, et cetera, of why this is going to make sense, right? So lots of business analyses, right? Like lots of competitive analysis. And once we had finally convinced them, they said, great, we're going to go do this thing. And of course, because we are a tech-enabled real estate brokerage, we want to provide our real estate agents with technology, right? So we need product people to go make the products to help real estate agents also sell homes. And they said, okay, existing product managers, anyone want this thing? And everyone said, no, I'm busy, right? Like I'm trying to help people buy homes. Trying to figure out how to help people sell homes is way too freaking difficult right now. We don't have the time.
Yeah.
And so basically my exec team had two choices. They could either try to go hire another product manager outside the organization, right? And like that could be risky because they don't know what we've been up to. They don't know the customer, right? Like they are coming totally new, and they don't necessarily know kind of the business and kind of the value proposition and our brand, our working processes. Or they could take this user researcher and turn me into a product manager and see what happens, right? Because I had convinced them that we should launch this business. So I already knew the customers, right? I already knew the business. The only thing that I was missing was I didn't know how to work with designers and engineers yet. And I told them so. I said, this is a mistake, right? Like I have never worked with an engineer. I have never worked with a designer. I don't think this is the right call. They said, you're overthinking it. We're gonna have you sit down with a designer for a week. We'll have you sit down with an engineering manager for a week and you'll figure it out. And that's what they did. So I sat down with a designer and hung out with them for a week. Then I shadowed an engineering manager for a week and learned a bunch about release processes, right? Like how do you do like QA testing, right? Like how do you make sure that your code doesn't like break? How do you make sure that you're designing things that make a lot of sense? How do you actually conduct research? How do you iterate through different mocks? And from there, basically, I became an associate product manager, right? And I think wrapping all the way back to how did I become a product manager? It was a lot of accidents, right? Like I didn't necessarily say like, oh, I specifically want to become a product manager. But I think when you look at the general trajectory, right, I was always trying to do more than what my job said, right? So like my job said that I should be a management consultant, but I got sick of being a management consultant because my users were really struggling to understand how to work with the software. So I became a mini user researcher, right? When I became a user researcher, I could have just said, here are the results. You guys go figure out if you want to invest in this business or not. But I said, that's not enough. We have a compelling opportunity to make the world a better place. We should launch this business. And so I moved into that strategy role. And so it was basically, I was always trying to do kind of more in parallel to what I was already doing. That kind of led me to fall into product management, which is the ultimate role of filling white space, right? Like when there is a vacuum, it is all about jumping in and closing that vacuum and delivering that value when no one else is eager to take it. So that's kind of how I fell into product management over a series of 2 to 3 years. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, they came to you like, "Hey, you're gonna be a founder over here," and then they ran you as an experiment.
Basically, yeah.
But I'm guessing it worked out though. So this was at Movoto.
Yeah, this was at Movoto. Yeah.
Okay. And then initially, so you started out as an associate product manager, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then looked like within 2 years you were a group product manager. So I'm guessing the experiment went well, but what else would you say helped you rise the ranks?
Yeah, for sure. So first off, in terms of running that business within a business, right? So we were able to within less than a year have that business within a business have more revenue than the entire existing business had over the past 12 years of existence, right? And so like it was I was strapped to a rocket ship. It was really
they loved you.
So yeah, that was a ton of fun. And so just in terms of how I jumped up so quickly, right? I think a lot of it was kind of similar to what I said before of just filling in the gaps, right? I think a lot of times people are afraid to do more than what their job says they're supposed to do because they're worried that, I'm putting myself at risk, I'm putting myself up for criticism, right? Like if I do this other stuff, people are going to ask, well, why aren't you doing your original job enough? Right? Like, am I going to be rewarded for taking on this additional work? I think for me, I didn't really worry so much about, will I be rewarded? Will I be punished? It was more about, there is a white space and no one is making this better. I need to jump in and close this gap because no one else is going to do it if I don't, right? And so I think a couple of things that would be helpful for folks to listen to, right, is basically in terms of product managers moving up in seniority, the kinds of problems that you tackle are different in terms of scope, right? So the thing is, a lot of your day-to-day processes are going to be kind of similar, but kind of the open question is, how well defined is the problem that you're trying to attack? Right. So when I was first starting as an associate product manager, it was very clear what I had to deliver. So basically, we knew exactly what we had to get out the door. And so kind of my mentor, product manager, said, like, this is the thing that you're going to be shipping, right? So kind of here are the bounds. You need to get it done in this time. These are the kind of like mini problems that you need to go figure out in terms of, oh, should the button be here or there, right? Like how might we optimize it through A/B testing? But the initiative was really well defined, right? Like ship this thing in this particular time frame and just make sure it gets done. But when you become a product manager, right, like no one is giving you initiatives. People are now giving you problem areas, and it's your job to figure out what initiative am I going to go create to go attack that problem area, right? So as a kind of full-time, full product manager, you are given a problem area that has been defined for you, but you have to define the initiatives, right? And then as a group product manager, you are given a business, and now it's your job to go define the problem areas and then to go define the initiatives that will then go solve those problem areas, right? So kind of the more you kind of rise the ladder, the more fuzzy things get and the broader the scope of challenges that you have to go tackle. And so part of the reason why I was able to jump up so quickly was actually due to partially fortunate or unfortunate timing. So the thing is, kind of as I continued to work as an associate product manager, what happened was that my mentoring product manager left the organization, right? And so now I had no one to define initiatives for me. So I said, I don't know what I'm doing. I guess I'm just going to define an initiative for myself. And so kind of that is where I started moving into, okay, I've got these problem areas that I now need to go attack to keep this totally new business that got spun up alive, right? Like, what are the things that we absolutely need to get done? What are the initiatives that I think make sense? Let me go pitch this to the CEO. Let me pitch this to, our COO, our CFO, and just make sure that things keep running, right? And that was all good and well up until my director also left. And so now there was no one running the business. And so I said, okay, well, I guess I'm going to have to step up and do even more. And so how do I tackle all of these kind of different problem areas in a way that makes sense across all these different teams, right? So I think in terms of rising the ranks, right, if those folks had not left at the times that they had left, I don't think I would have necessarily been promoted as quickly. I think the other thing to really keep in mind is people don't typically give you the title unless you've already been doing the work for a quarter or so, right? Because really titles are kind of retrospective, like kind of they kick in after the fact. Because the thing is, if people give you a title and then you flare out, like you don't meet the promise, right? Then that looks really bad to the company. Like that looks really bad on leadership. And so they really want to make sure that you are a known bet. And so when you are stretching yourself and kind of tackling the next level up's work, and you're demonstrating that you can do that all really well, then it's basically almost risk-free for the executive team to say, okay, great, they deserve that title, right? They've already done it for a while. Like the results look fantastic. And so we're just going to give it to them, right? And so I think a lot of it is less about how do I get what I want, and it's more about how do I give other people what they need. And by giving people value, by creating this value in the world, other people will give you back value in return because you've solved one of their pains, right? Because the thing is, again, like I could have waited for my executive team to go hire another full PM and said, no, I'm just going to step in because I've seen how he runs the show. I'll figure out how to run the show. Don't worry, right? I could have waited for my executive team to hire another director of product. And I said, I'm not going to wait around. Like we have a business to run. I'm stepping in. Like we will figure this out. And so I think a lot of it is just taking that ownership and that initiative to go attack a problem, even if you don't feel well equipped to attack the problem, that courage and that conviction to bet on yourself and the humility to learn from people who were previously attacking the problem, I think were all really valuable for me to jump up the ranks that quickly.
Well, I'm with Beth on this. I'm loving this. So 2 points I want to like just reiterate from what you said. So one was so everyone, you have to work hard obviously to move up, but the difference between people that just work hard and do the same thing forever versus people that work hard and rise is, like you said, taking that little risk and doing that little extra that maybe you're scared of some pushback, but that's what makes you stand out. And then the second thing that I want to harp on also that you said is doing the job before you have it. So like, I know, so I come from data science, and when I mentor students, they're like, yeah, like all these data science jobs want PhDs. I'm like, go apply for data analyst jobs and then just do data science work. Like if you do that extra, your manager is not going to complain. Like your manager's going to be happy.
Exactly.
So whether you're a data scientist, developer, designer, if you want to, be product manager, do a little bit of product management, take a little bit more responsibility, and then it's easier to get into that role.
Exactly. And I think one of the things, that you hit on, which is super, super true, is just because companies give you a job posting and there's a bunch of requirements in there, doesn't actually mean that that's how they're truly filling the role, right? Yeah. Kind of that is how they want other people to think about the role. But at the end of the day, if you wind up solving the business's pain, they hire you. Like that's just how it works, right? And so if you're in there, exactly like you said, like if you're in there as a data analyst and you're already stretching up to do data science work, like without asking for more pay, right? Like you're just taking away all of that work from the company and it's like your headache now and not theirs. they're going to say, I don't see why they shouldn't be a data scientist, right? Like they're already doing the job fantastically. I don't know why we would go hire another one, because that's a lot of expense. This person's already well-trained. They know how the company runs. They already have a track record. We're already giving them feedback to do the right thing. This is fine, right? Like be a data scientist, whatever. You don't have to have a PhD. So totally like taking that ownership and knowing when to stretch in to go take pains away from your manager and your manager's manager, right? Like solving those headaches on their behalf is a really great way to not only grow your own skill set so that you can lean on that if you ever leave the company, but also within the company, because you've created that value, it is much harder for people to say, oh, well, we shouldn't promote them, right? Because you've created that value and they didn't know how to tackle that before. So yeah, totally resonate with the strategy that you are that you're leveraging in terms of mentoring data analysts to break into data science for sure.
Yeah, and then you obviously do some mentorship too. So I guess after 2 years as a product manager, you decide to start Product Manager HQ. So what initially motivated you to do that and give back? And what was the process like to start that up?
Yeah, great question. So honestly, I think a lot of my work for Product Manager HQ has been me trying to solve my own pain, right? Because basically, how do I phrase this? At that time, right, like I didn't really have all those resources in play. Like as I mentioned, right, like I had a manager leave and I had a director leave. And so I was really struggling of how do I actually do all of this stuff? I feel very isolated and alone in terms of making all of these things work on my own.
Yeah.
And so I really wanted to solve a pain for myself, right? So Kevin, my co-founder, and I, we really were focused on, how do we create a community where people can talk shop, right? Like how do we have a way for people to not feel so isolated and to be able to come together to figure out like what are all the different problems that we're tackling and how can we provide each other with new perspectives so that we can tackle that, right? So kind of that is how we started spinning up the Slack community for Product Manager HQ, right? And then in terms of how that continued to organically evolve, right? So from there, right, I think one of the things that we started noticing is, okay, well, we all have our own experiences, but how are we going to grow if we don't get kind of additional external input? And so one of the things that we started doing is, well, look, everyone is trying to go read up on product management resources, right? Like everyone's trying to figure out what is the best content out there. And the challenge is there's so much, right? Like you could theoretically read about stuff in psychology or business or design or data or analytics or engineering. There's so much stuff out there, right? Like how do I know how to prioritize my time? And so rather than let everyone have to go try to figure out how to reinvent the wheel and go look for all these resources, we start pulling together a newsletter so that way we would already have kind of a curated, pre-filtered, these are the things that you really got to read this week to continue to grow. Don't worry about the rest because like we've condensed it down for you, right? And so, as of today, right, like our newsletter has been honestly really amazing. We've had more than 30,000 subscribers every week. I think our open rates are more than 33%. So it's pretty crazy. And so kind of that was meant to solve our community's pain of we can't all be trying to figure out what to read, right? Like there's just too much stuff out there. How do we make sure that we can help people prioritize their time wisely? I think then from there, then kind of we organically discovered another pain of, well, great, there are all these resources, but there are just some things that aren't really well covered yet, right? I think one of the things that there wasn't a lot of coverage on before was like, how do you become an associate product manager, right? Like there just wasn't a lot of guidance around that, right? There's a lot of gaps around how to become a business-to-business product manager or how a platform product manager works every day. And so as we discovered these gaps, we said, well, it's not fair that we know this stuff and no one else in the world knows this stuff. Why don't we write, right? And so we then created, PMHQ, the blog, so that way we could share our own internal insights and kind of contribute back to that product management literature to help a global community of product managers all continue to grow together and to close those gaps where we had that expertise, but no one else had that, right? So kind of in terms of those three core pillars of Product Manager HQ, the Slack community, the newsletter, and the blog, all of that really came from, Kevin and I trying to solve our own pains as we discovered them. It was very organic. I don't think we necessarily had like, oh, we're going to try to generate, however much revenue by whatever time or get however many users. It was all focusing on there's a pain in the world. We're going to go solve this pain. And when we saw that market validation and resonance of, yeah, this pain is really painful and like you guys are doing a great job of solving it, that's when we doubled down and continued to invest in those areas for sure.
Yeah, I think that's how the best products always come about. It's you have a need and then you build it yourself. Like you are your own customer, so
exactly.
You know what you need. And I think that's also something to consider for early, tech careers, choose a company where you actually like the product, where it solves one of your needs, because you're gonna connect to that and produce better work like that. One question I have, just like from the entrepreneur side of things, is how did you build that newsletter to 30K? Like what was the initial momentum that got that thing going?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there, unfortunately, I do have to defer to Kevin, my other co-founder. He's a lot more on the actual growth side, and I'm a lot more on kind of like the content side. But yeah, I think a lot of it was just, I think back during that time, Quora was a lot hotter than it is now. And so I think one of the things that we did was basically we would jump into Quora or different forums, right? And basically say, oh, well, here is a question that people have. We're going to answer this thing. By the way, link back to productmanagerhq.com, right? Like here's our newsletter, et cetera, right? And kind of that continuous link backing was very helpful. And of course, having strategic partnerships kind of across other organizations. So of course, there are all of these companies who all have their own newsletters, right? And kind of when we see that there's a synergistic effect between the stuff that we're sharing and the stuff that they're sharing, sometimes we'll promote their content, they'll promote ours, and kind of that way, we get that continued traction without having to do all of it ourselves, because that is the way that partnership works, right? And of course, on the flip side, then a company who is running their own newsletter, right? Like they are able to access more potential customers if they're selling things to product managers, as well as really great talent, right? Because everyone's looking for amazing product managers, and what do the most amazing product managers do? They try to level themselves up, and so they're in the PMHQ community, right? So they are finding the talent or the customer base that they need. And so kind of these partnerships where we co-market together are very, very powerful.
Gotcha. So looking at productmanagerhq.com, I think you write an article a week or maybe even more. What's the most read post on there? What are people most looking for and engaging with there? Yeah,
for sure. So to better fine tune your question, right? I think there's a difference between, what is most read versus, let's say, what most deeply solves the pain. Just because in terms of what's most read, right? Like that's not just necessary. It doesn't just solve the pain, but it also has really great SEO. It has really great link backs, etc. Yeah. And so our most read post is our breakdown of the product design interview question. So basically the question, how would you design a product for et cetera, right? And kind of that we've racked up, over 100,000 views over the last few years. Right. And I think the reason for that is because we jumped into that space pretty early, right? Like back then, there weren't a lot of people who were trying to do interview question breakdowns, right? So basically, how do you tackle this particular interview question in a way that's structured, that makes sense, rather than just saying a thing from your own experience in kind of an unstructured way, right? So because we had attacked that space, that was one of our first articles in how do you actually break down a problem very, very thoughtfully in a really structured way. We got a lot of resonance from there, right? And so kind of year over year, kind of that is one of our highest performing articles just in terms of views. But in terms of, what are the most deeply impactful ones, maybe their views aren't quite as high because they aren't necessarily the specific search terms that people look for. But when I think about the ones where people will reach out to me unsolicited and say, Clement, you changed my life. I didn't realize that you could do it this way, or I didn't realize that I could become a product manager this way, right? I think a lot of that comes with, I think kind of the most valuable piece that we have there is how to think of yourself as a product, right? Because I think a lot of times when people want to become product managers, right, they're always thinking about it from their own perspective, which is, a fair, normal perspective to have of, I want to be a PM. I want to do something, right? Like I want to get into this industry. I want to do really cool stuff. I want to build stuff, right? But they don't think about it in terms of, it doesn't really matter what you want to do. It actually matters what a company needs, right? Because the thing is, people don't create jobs for you to take them. They create jobs because they don't know how to solve the problem and they need someone to come in to solve it for them, right? And so the thing is, if you're not actively thinking about what is the pain that I'm trying to solve, what are the things that I'm naturally really good at doing, and how do I aim at attacking those pains, you won't differentiate yourself, right? You're not going to be able to stand out to the company that needs you the most. You just keep saying like, oh, I want to be a PM. I want to be a PM, right? And kind of that doesn't give you a lot of traction, right? And so I think kind of the most transformative articles that we have are all kind of in that vein of, let's flip the paradigm of, rather than what is it that I want, right? How do I create value for other people, right? So how do I identify the kinds of companies that I want to apply for? How do I catch their attention? How do I understand the pains that they have? And how do I build up my skill sets to demonstrate to them that I will solve their pains in a way that no one else can, right? And kind of that has enabled so many people to successfully break into product management. And so, the view counts on that particular article are lower, but I would say that they've been more life-changing. So rather than just, practically, how do you tackle a single interview question? It's how do you identify your hypothesis, your thesis of what is the value that I bring into the world, and prove that thesis by finding the companies, your target audience, that will really resonate with that.
Gotcha. So kind of drawing from some of those same articles, if you were talking to right now like a developer or a designer, what would you want them to know as a product manager? So not for them to get into product management, but more, what do you want them to know to like cooperate properly?
Yeah, for sure. That's a really good question. And so I think the thing that is really important is that I think there's a lot of misconception, not just even from developers and designers, but really just from kind of the broader job market itself of product managers are the decision makers. And yes, kind of, but not really. Because the thing is, you have to remember all the way back at the start, we said, a product manager is trying to find a solution that's going to work for customers and the business and the development team, right? And so you're always constrained by serving those three, right? Like you are always in a position of servant leadership. You're always trying to make other people's lives better. And so you don't get to just say, I want this vision to be this way, and I'm going to go do all this cool stuff myself. It's, I need to go figure out what are people's biggest headaches, and do they actually need me to go solve that for them, right? And so you're always thinking on other people's behalf. And so I think, many times, developers or designers, they will say, well, gee, I don't know why you haven't written the ticket yet, or I don't know why you don't have the requirement yet, or I don't know why we're still stuck here. And it takes time for us to understand what the customer needs. And even if we find out that that's what the customer needs, the business might not need it. Like it might not be valuable, right? And so, there are many times when, you might get these feature requests from a bunch of users, but it doesn't meaningfully move the business forward. In fact, it might move the business backward because you're attacking a space that doesn't make thematic sense for the business, right? And so I think, of course, it is good for people to be vocal and to raise their concerns, right? Like if your counterpart product manager, like as a developer or as a designer, if your counterpart product manager seems to be paralyzed or seems to not be moving as quickly as you'd like them to, right? Of course, ask them honestly, genuinely, like, how are you doing? Where are you blocked? How can I help out? And the thing is, it's likely that they have a pretty good sense of what's going on in, what's going on from like a development perspective of how are we currently thinking about it in terms of building it or designing it, but that there's probably some challenge happening in terms of coordinating with customers or really understanding the business and getting folks to coordinate there, right? So I think for product managers, we're always trying to play this balancing game of we've only got the same 24 hours a day that everyone else has, but we need to go talk to customers and the business and development teams in a way that continues to move everyone forward at their pace, right? So basically, the customer has gone a whole workday, and the business has gone a whole workday, and the development team has gone a whole workday, and the product manager needs to make enough progress to keep all three of these on the same workday pace, right? And so that's a lot. Yeah. And so, certainly not saying that you should let your product managers be late. They shouldn't be, right? Like they have a responsibility to you to deliver on time. But if you see them struggling, just have some empathy that it's not just us trying to figure out what design makes sense or what makes sense from an engineering perspective. Fundamentally, the thing that we're trying to build needs to provide value to both the customer and the business too. And trying to get those pieces to work together can sometimes be a very difficult challenge. So I would say that is the thing that is most important. Is it's not like we get to unilaterally say, we're going to do things this way. It's we should be wise and understand what decision we're making to move the business forward and to move the customers forward. So even though in theory we have the power to say, oh, like let's go do this thing that provides no value, in practice, we shouldn't, right? Like it's a responsibility that we need to make sure that we are always being servant leaders and providing value to customers and to our business. And that means that we need to take the time to go understand who are our customers, what do our customers need, what is the business, where's the business going, and how to get all these things to line up in a way that still works with what we are designing and then actively building. So it takes time.
So looking at your job right now at Blend specifically, like
Mhm.
What would you say is a split between, all the synthesized information from all these sides, meetings and surveys, whoever it might be, and like project management? So, signing tickets and deadlines and all that stuff. What's the split like?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think part of the challenge is it really depends on both the life cycle of the initiative as well as who your teammates are, right? And so I would say that I've definitely had some initiatives where I was a lot more on like the strategy side, and I didn't necessarily have to worry as much about the project management side of what are the deadlines, et cetera, because I had really strong engineering counterparts, design counterparts, business counterparts in terms of running the business operations and making sure that customers get set up on time, et cetera. And so there, right, like I had a lot more focus on, okay, what is our vision? What is our strategy? What is it that the market actually needs? And take a lot of that time to go talk to customers, right? On the flip side, sometimes you just wind up in pure execution mode where you just have to get things out the door, and 99% of your time is spent in project management of, okay, I need to give this status update to these different customers who are all trying to ship with, and make sure that also that when they report bugs back, right, like we figure out how to slot them into the sprints, but in a way that doesn't thrash people, so that way they don't get snapped in between these different work streams and get interrupted, because that causes them to be less productive. We need to make sure that we're also keeping our executive team up to date, et cetera, et cetera. And so there are some days where it's 99% project management, and there are some days where it's 1%. I think it just really depends on what initiative are you tackling, kind of how mature is that, how many customers do you have, and kind of who are your teammates. Because if you're trying to, launch a totally new product for, right, for a single customer, right, and that single customer is worth a lot to your business, you're going to be spending a lot of time doing project management, because it's really important that everyone's on the same page and that everyone's got the same status. And because it's a new initiative, right, like the company is not betting the house on doing everything through that initiative, right? So it's basically just you running the project management as well as the actual strategy, as well as the actual like learning, synthesis, etc. Whereas on the flip side, if you're tackling a much more mature product, right, typically a company is going to have a lot more infrastructure in place to go gather that customer research on your behalf, to go coordinate across engineering teams, right, to go coordinate across design teams, et cetera. And so from those perspectives, right, kind of you'll have a lot more time to kind of work through deeper level thinking rather than just executing all the time if you're working on a more mature product.
Makes sense. So one thing for the audience, if you have any questions, you could start writing them. We'll get to those in a few minutes. But before we get to that, so Clement, I know you wrote 3 books. So the first question is basically like, how did you decide, hey, I'm going to go out and write this whole book? And then like, what's that process like?
Yeah, for sure. So in terms of why I decided to write a book, and keep in mind that this is only my reason for writing a book, right? Like it doesn't have to be your reason for writing a book. The reason why I wrote is because one of the things that I noticed is, in terms of all of the articles that I'm writing all the time, right? I think people find it valuable, but they only find maybe 1 or 2 articles per year, let's say, right? And the thing is, I want to help people be able to not just break into product management, but also be better product managers and be better colleagues to engineers and designers and business stakeholders, right? Like I really want people to be able to do their best work and to keep businesses running. And so the thing is, I noticed the challenge with having a blog is that you're competing against the rest of the internet for people's attention, right? It's really hard to get someone to actually sit down and take the time and go read through all of your other articles, right? Like the thing is, PMHQ, like as a blog, currently has more than 100 articles. I think we're currently at like the 180 or 190 mark. And the thing is, no one's read them all, right? And that's completely fair because it's a blog. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to help people kind of break away from those distractions and actually have like an end-to-end book of how am I actually supposed to break into product management, right? Because it's like, yes, you read my article on how to write a really good resume, and you read my article on how to tackle this particular interview question, but these things flying at you randomly, like when you're looking at it, let's say, maybe during a lull in your workday at 3 p.m., like it's not going to stick with you, right? Like, like I want to give people the delivery mechanism for them to be able to take actual concerted action to go change their own career trajectories, right? And so I decided a book is the best way to go do that, because it forces you to sit down and actually work through it, but without being something like, let's say, a movie, right, where like you're forced to kind of sit all the way to the end. You can always stop kind of halfway through, right? And so that's what initially got me to think, okay, well, I really need to go write a book. And the one that matters the most is breaking into product management, because that's the thing that people have a lot of struggle in terms of figuring out, like, how do I even get started, right? Like, what is product management? Like, is it really for me, right? Like, what am I going to face as I move through that process? And so basically that's how I got started in terms of writing the books. I think because of a lot of the success that I got to see from that very first book, I decided that, it's not just people who are trying to pivot into product management who have this challenge of, I don't have a concerted action plan and I don't have like a one-stop resource, right? People who are existing product managers also have the same problem, right? Like, again, there are all these articles out there. There's all these newsletters I could subscribe to. How do I actually take tangible steps to become better, right? And so, again, I kind of took that same approach to write my other two books, Excellent Execution as a Product Manager, which is more focused on how do I actually run the show? And so a little bit more towards that project management side, but of course, also just getting the things done. And then my latest book, which I released actually this morning, Refining Your Product Skills, is more about how do I collaborate with other stakeholders and really like get the ball moving, as well as expand into these other product skill sets, that people don't normally talk about as frequently, right? So, when you think about data analytics, right? Like, yeah, there's data analytics, but like, what are the metrics that actually matter? How do you actually pick a metric that matters, right? Like, I think there's not a lot of discussion about that. And so putting that in the same place as how do I manage other product managers? How do I manage Upward and manage my manager? How do I manage my executive team, right? Is a really valuable way for someone to reflect on the totality of all the things that I'm doing day to day and take that time to think, okay, well, it seems like I'm actually doing pretty well at analytics. It seems like the thing I'm not doing so hot on is how do I actually do interviews, right? Like, or how do I actually go talk to my executive team and then take that time to go refine that place, right? So again, kind of for me, writing the books was less about, I have these totally new ideas that don't exist. It's the ideas already exist. People just aren't getting to them. How can I package them together more tightly so that people have the opportunity to step away from their screens and not be distracted by a blog and actually sit down and work through that to make a meaningful change to their careers?
Yeah, no, it's a huge difference, blog to book. So I definitely feel that in terms of dissect information, everyone shares blogs all day and you're like, hey, that looks interesting. But once you get to read it, like sometimes when you even get to read about a book, it's personal, you can read it whenever. But also, I guess it's very clutch timing that we got you today, right when the launch. So when you launch also, like all these books, they're all on Amazon, I'm assuming?
Yeah, they're on Amazon.
Awesome. So I guess, yeah, if anyone are interested in them, definitely search for Clement's name. They should all show up over there. And with publishing a book, one topic that comes up in tech in general, but also probably with publishing a book, is imposter syndrome. So did you have any of that, like when you were getting ready to publish that first book?
Yeah, totally. I had a lot of nights where I was thinking, wow, what am I doing? Like, am I really the right guy to be doing this? Like, there are so many other people who have written better things than I have, right? Like, is a book really the best thing to be doing? So definitely had a lot of imposter syndrome, I think. And you hit the nail on the head, right? Imposter syndrome is not just a thing that happens in publishing, right? It's a thing that happens kind of across tech and even just across all of our work lives, right? A kind of, no matter what kind of work you're doing, anytime you're trying to create something of value in the world, there's always fear of what if someone rejects it, right? Like, what if I'm not the best person to do it? Mm-hmm. And I think part of the challenge of imposter syndrome is, it's you holding yourself to impossibly high standards. And so one of the things that I've personally found to be really valuable for working through imposter syndrome and working through writer's block is just to keep reminding myself, I only need to make one person's life better, right? Like, I don't need to make everyone's life better. But if I made one person's life better through the work that I did, I have made a difference, right? And so the thing is, as long as you can create value for just one person, even if that person is yourself, right? Like, there are others like that person, right? And so you just need to go and do something that is better than nothing, right? Because again, if we think about, let's take the perspective away from you as someone who's trying to create something, right? As you as the, quote unquote, potential imposter. Let's think about it from the world's perspective, right? Globally, from the world, if you did not create the thing that you're going to create, the world is missing that permanently, right? Like, that is a gigantic loss, because what if 10 people, 20 people could have benefited from that work, right? Like, it's not as much about it's not so much about you as, am I the right person to do this? Or like, is this going to be as amazing as I think it's going to be? It's how do I make the world a slightly better place just through my work? Or like, how can I make it just a little bit better? Just make one person's life somewhat easier, if I can do that, I can do anything, right? So I think it's more about lowering that standard away from, I want my book to sell 1 million copies, because let's be real, like my books don't sell millions of copies, right?
Very rare.
How do I get one person to open that book and say, oh, thank God, this is somewhat clearer than everything else I've read, right? Like that's a win. That's a gigantic win, right? So it just has to be somewhat better than what already exists out there. Go get it done, right? So I think that's really the key, is how do you create something that is a little bit better in the world than what currently exists? And that's enough. It just has to provide value for just one person. It doesn't have to be the best thing in the world. You don't have to become, Elon Musk, right? Or like Bill Gates within a single day, right? Just get something out there and make someone's life better. And that will help you continue to move forward and fight your imposter syndrome.
Exactly. Like, you can only lose by not publishing or putting out whatever you want to put out. It's like, like you said, if it's just one person, like for me, if I get one view on a video, I'm like, yes, like it's like someone watched it. Like that's awesome. Like, yeah, hopefully I helped them out. And that's how you have to think. It's you take it one step at a time. If it blows up, it blows up. If not, if it serves you, it makes you happy, then why not?
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's perfect. And one question I want to close on, because I know everyone always will wonder, is if you were coming out of a boot camp right now, let's just say you studied either engineering or design, you could choose. What would be your game plan to go out and get your first job?
Fantastic question. And so again, that goes back to something I hit on earlier, which is you got to make it not about you. You got to think about it from the employer's point of view, right? So what is the pain that I'm trying to solve, and for who, right? Because the thing is, as a developer, let's say, right, there are different organizations, different companies out there that might have different tech stacks, right? And it might not make sense if I try to apply as like a generic software engineer to all these different companies, but instead I might be a really great backend engineer. I might be a really great front-end engineer, right? Like, what is the thing that will help me stand out? And the only way that you're going to know that is to pick a target, right? Basically, you got to reverse engineer the job search. So instead of you saying, I want to be hired, it's what company would hire me, go after them, right? Like go and really understand what is their pain, what are they struggling with, and why did they open that job in the first place? Because again, we got to remember, employers honestly hate making jobs, right? Because when they open up a job, what do they have to do? They have to go pay that salary, but they also have to recruit, and they have to pay benefits, and then they have to onboard you and then retain you and make sure that you don't leave. That's a lot of work. And so if an employer could solve that pain with their own workforce right now, they wouldn't have opened the job, right? So they have a pain. There is something that is really, truly painful that they can't get done without someone stepping into that role. You need to go figure out what is that pain, right? And so the thing is, being an engineer at a 10-person startup is completely different from being an engineer at a 5,000 person company, right? And so, working in the public space is very different from working in nonprofits, which is very different from working in if you're working in government versus nonprofit versus, like private markets, they're all totally different, right? So I need to go find what is the target audience that I'm going to go after, and what is their pain, right? Do those pains actually line up with the value that I'm trying to bring to the table? And if not, that's not a reflection on me. It's just a reflection of what we call product market fit, right? So basically, product market fit is a two-sided dance, right? Because the thing is, the audience has some set of needs, and you are some product, and kind of you're all trying to figure out, like, do you fit? And so if there's not a fit, it doesn't mean that you're bad. It just means that that market doesn't fit. So go find another market, right? Or go refine your product, refine yourself so that you fit the market that you're trying to go after, right? So I think one of the things that I see a lot of people not do is actually tangibly decide, I'm going to go after this one specific company, and I'm going to just chase them down. I'm just going to go really understand, why are they trying to hire for this role? What are the kinds of skill sets that they're missing, right? Not what are the skill sets that they want, or what are the skill sets that are on the resume? Like, what is the thing that they actually cannot figure out how to do unless this person joins? And how do I show them that I'm the person who's going to get all that stuff done, right? And so I say that because one of the things that actually happened when I was applying to be a product manager at Blend is they were saying, oh, well, for this product management role, we're looking for someone who has 7 years of experience. And I said, I don't know why you're talking to me, because I have 1.5, right? Like this makes no sense. And as I continued to talk, it was, oh, why did they say 7? The reason why they said 7 is because someone who's got 7 years of experience likely has had experiences in launching a totally new product out of nothing and breaking into totally new industries, right? That is what they wanted this PM to do. It's called a new business initiatives product manager. And the thing is, I had done nothing but that for the last 1.5 years, right? Like again, at Movoto, the thing that I was doing was creating new businesses out of nothing. I wasn't trying to figure out how to scale existing businesses, right? And they didn't need another scaler. They wanted someone to go break into a totally new field. And so I was the perfect match. They hired me as the new business initiatives product manager at Blend, even though I wasn't qualified on paper at all, because I actually solved the pain, right? So you got to stop worrying about what is it that people are saying on paper. It's what is the actual company's problem, right? Like what problem do they not know how to attack? How do I demonstrate to them that I am the one person who's going to fix this problem the best? They'll take you every time, right? So when you think about it less as, oh my gosh, I'm a candidate and I'm like fighting against all these other candidates for this role, right? It's not that I want to be a software engineer. It's that I am trying to create value in the world, right? Who is my target audience and what are they struggling with? How do I unlock that value for them? When you go into that interview process, it's then less about, oh no, did I shake their hand hard enough? Or, oh no, am I saying the right things? It's let's work together to understand what your pain is as a company, because trust me, I know how to solve it, right? Like when you bring in that confidence, they're gonna take you, right? So just really think about it as, it is not that I want to be a developer or I want to be a designer or that I want to be a product manager. It's none of that. It's there is a pain out there in the world. I am the best equipped to go solve that pain. But first, I need to know who am I solving the pain for and what pain am I actually solving for, right? Because as another quick example, right? I am currently specialized as a business-to-business product manager, right? And that means that I happen to not be a business-to-consumer product manager. I have not run an A/B test in years, right? Because business-to-business PMs don't run A/B tests as frequently because they're working with institutions. They're not working with millions of kind of similarly looking consumers, right? And so you can't really A/B test like a company, right? And so from that perspective, I'm not going to be a good fit for B2C, and that's okay because that's not my fit, right? Kind of, the way that credit cards aren't used a lot in China, let's say, the way that Snapchat doesn't really work for grandparents, there are just some companies that you're not going to be a good fit for, and that is completely okay. Stop worrying about the ones that you're not going to be a good fit for. Find the one that you will be a fit for, because you only need one company to say yes, right? So go find the company that has a problem and figure out, how do I solve this problem, and get them to say yes. You don't need a billion offers. You just need to find the one company that's going to find value from you.
I wholeheartedly agree with all that. I always say you have to focus in and find a few companies, narrow down, solve their problem, show them that you could solve that problem, and then you'll get the job. But there's some people that they say, hey, it's a numbers game, and spray and pray that resume wherever you go.
It doesn't work. Trust me, I've tried it before. It doesn't.
Yeah. Well, one question Beth had is, how do you get PM experience when you don't have a job? Trying to get the first job in tech, have been learning as a developer, but past work experience plays more to PM. So it's recommended to go for PM.
Yeah, great question. So I think a couple of things that I want to first pause on is, is it true that you want to be a product manager, right? Because again, I think a lot of times, people assume things about product management that aren't true, right? And so one of the things that you need to keep in mind as a product manager is you're going to be in meetings a lot of the time, because meetings are a great way to get a bunch of people to be aligned at the same pace, right? Like if you try to send people a bunch of Slack messages or you send people a bunch of emails, it's not going to work, right? So like you're going to be in meetings from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. and they have to work after that because you only had the meetings to align people. You haven't actually done the work yet. And so I think a lot of folks actually go from product out into becoming developers or designers because then they feel that I am creating things all the time. It's not that my time is spent managing people and making stuff happen. It's I actually get to do the work, right? So, just because someone recommended for you to do product management, I'm not saying that it's wrong, but think about it carefully from your own perspective. Is that the pain that I want to solve in the world, right? Like, is that what I really, really want to go do? Or do I happen to have so much fun with development that maybe I should just keep being a developer, right? So again, that is completely up to you because you know yourself the best. So I can't really give you specific advice there. But if I were in the situation, right, of, I am training as a dev, but I'm more likely to break into PM and I want to be a PM, I think one of the things that can help is to demonstrate to other people your product management experience by basically, like, the thing that you need to do is you need to help recruiters close the gap, right? Because the thing is, there are so many people who are all trying to apply to be product managers. And so the thing is, companies are spoiled for choice. They have so much potential supply And so if you can't close the gap in their minds ASAP, they're just going to say, I got another resume I can go look at, and they'll go look, right? And so you need to catch their attention by demonstrating that you can already go solve their pain, right? So again, it's all about understanding what kind of pain that company has and demonstrating that you are a really good fit for that. Because again, the thing is, there are so many different kinds of product managers, right? Like, let's say a technical product manager, someone who works with APIs all the time, is a completely different beast from someone who is a mobile PM. A mobile PM, is a lot more focused on user experiences, whereas a technical PM is way more focused on like the technical infrastructure and the scalability, right? And so if you don't dictate, I'm going to be a technical PM, and you try to apply for all these mobile PM roles where you're expected to know user experiences and A/B testing, it's not going to help, right? Similarly, right, like, are you a product manager who is going to do business to consumer or business to business? Are you public sector, private sector, or nonprofit, right? Like, are you aiming for a really big company or a really tiny company? Are you going to be tackling, are you going to be tackling totally new initiatives that have never existed before? Or are you going to be scaling existing initiatives, right? Kind of each of those different decisions requires a different kind of product manager. And so it's really important for you to not just say, I want to be a PM, but I want to be this specific PM for this specific company because it solves this one particular pain, right? So again, we got to go all the way back to what is the pain that the company has. And then from there, we can then figure out what are the experiences that I must have to demonstrate that I will solve the pain, right? So again, let's say that I am applying to be a new business initiatives PM at some, let's say, 10-person startup, right?
Yeah.
The thing that I really need to go focus on in my resume, right, or in my side projects is I can identify new markets. I can go talk to people. I can synthesize a bunch of results, right? Like, I don't care that you know how to A/B test if I'm this 10-person startup trying to find a new market, because I don't need you to scale my market. I need you to go find another one, right? So you really need to go focus on, okay, how do I do all the qualitative interviews and all the business research? On the flip side, if it's, we are looking for a growth product manager, right? A growth product manager or a growth hacker, someone who is trying to, increase volumes by 50%, 100%, whatever. You need to go demonstrate that you know how to run experiments. You need to go demonstrate that you really understand the data analytics and the psychology. And if you don't have that in your resume, if you're saying, oh, well, I know how to go find these totally new markets, that's not going to help you. So it's all about figuring out what is that company's specific pain for that specific role, then work backwards and demonstrate that I have the skills to go do this. If you don't have the skills, that's okay, because we can all create side hobbies or side initiatives whenever, right? Kind of, it has never been easier to attempt to kick off a new app idea or to attempt to kick off a new initiative outside of work. And so if you're looking to have those experiences to try to close that gap, I recommend doing that if you don't currently have the job that you want.
Great advice. No, honestly, I learned a lot. Like, I thought I knew product management. I did learn some new things. So Clement, thank you so much for joining us and sharing this knowledge. For anyone that listened and enjoyed, definitely like the video, subscribe. We'll be back here on Wednesday night at 8. And we'll be having a new guest every single week. So hopefully they'll be as awesome as Clement, who definitely dropped a lot of knowledge on us. But otherwise, until next time, thanks again for everyone for joining, and have a good day.